Hi, today I will be analyzing Langston Hughes' poem Ballad of the Landlord. This is a poem that illustrates the story of a speaker whose house is very run down and old. When the speaker tries to tell the different faults to his landlord, like "my roof has sprung a leak" or "these steps is broken down," instead of helping him, his landlord actually demands money from him. This demand offends the speaker and forces him to react in a hostile way, physically threatening his landlord. At the same time, it is this hostility that will eventually land him a trip to jail, 90 days, with no bail. In terms of analysis, one of the points worth exploring is the use of vernacular in the poem. Hughes uses the vernacular form in the text to create a developing tone in the speaker and ultimately rob him of his identity. First of all, I will be addressing the evolving tone in the whole poem. So, in the first two stanzas, Hughes introduces a speaker that remains neutral, that is calm, and it is simply trying to communicate to his landlord the many problems that are occurring in his home. For example, this is seen in the first stanza, "My roof has sprung a leak. Don't you remember I told you about it?" Or in the second, "Landlord, landlord, these steps is broken down." In this case, the speaker is calm, he is not defiant, he is not hostile, he is just trying to tell his landlord of the different problems in his house in hope that there will be change. By the third stanza, when the speaker is asking or is refusing to pay the landlord what the landlord is asking for, we see a rise in action. We see the frustration within the speaker, and we see this rise in tension that will eventually culminate towards the end of the poem. This is seen, $10 you say I owe you, $10 you say is due. Well, that's $10 more and I'll pay you till you fix this house up new. So we are introduced into a speaker who is slowly gaining power, gaining independence, but is still frustrated. So he's developing his tone is developing into a hostile, into a negative thing that eventually culminates in the fifth stanza with phrases such as or "you ain't gonna be able to say a word if I land my fist on you." So now we have an explicitly defined tone within the speaker. He's physically threatening his landlord, and it's basically a culmination of his emotion. So immediately after this culmination or climax of the first speaker's tone, we see an immediate change into another speaker. One that is obviously not using the vernacular because all of his lines are grammatically correct and well-written sentences. For example, "Police, police, come and get this man. He's trying to ruin the government and overturn the land." So these last two stanzas that represent this change in the speaker emphasizes the development in the first speaker's tone and actually portray his mood and portray his identity, which is also a very important part of this poem. So in terms of identity, the vernacular is essential because it gives the speaker his own attitude, his own style, and his own recognition, his own identity, only to rob him of it later, emphasizing on the story of unfairness that is given to us throughout the whole poem. So first of all, as I said before, the speaker has his own identity, and this to some extent is giving him agency and independence and makes him, I wouldn't say unique, but makes him different from the second speaker that we see. So this is seen in phrases such as or "what" or "ain't gonna be able." So the use of vernacular actually gives him his style, and specifically the lack of the vernacular in the two last stanzas with grammatically correct sentences is the way in which the speaker is robbed of his identity, especially in the last three lines. last four lines, I'm sorry. Man threatens landlord, tenant held no bail. Judge gives Negro 90 days in county jail. So in this case, correct diction or grammatically or non-vernacular diction is used to demote the speaker, the first speaker, from a man to a color. So in the first one, we have man threatens landlord. Then he uses the word tenant, which is slightly a step down from being a man. Tenant held no bail. Judge gives Negro 90 days in county jail. So in this case, the lack of vernacular, once the vernacular is taken out of the poem, the identity of the speaker is robbed from him because he is demoted from a human with rights, with liberty that is free, to just a color, and a color that is racially repressed and disliked. Precisely parting from this idea of the speaker being robbed of his identity, the vernacular also evokes this idea that people from a lower social extract do not receive the same treatment as others. So this is seen throughout the whole poem, well, especially in the first two stanzas, where the speaker is saying the many faults that are in the house, and that we see this inequality or this unfairness through the landlord's refusal to help, and actually, instead of fulfilling his responsibility as a landlord, he is taking advantage of it and actually asking for money. So then we also see the landlord's behavior in the sixth stanza, where he says, "Police, police, come and get this man. He's trying to ruin the government and overturn the land." Even though we know that the first speaker is within his rights and is innocent, the landlord portrays him as a possible threat to the government, as someone who should not deserve to have land, should not deserve to have a house, but belongs in jail. So it is precisely, again, the lack of vernacular, or that characterizes the landlord, or the portrayal of the landlord's behavior, that evokes this idea that people from a lower social extract do not receive the same treatment and are not regarded as the same. And this just emphasizes the whole story of unfairness that the whole poem is saying, the story of injustice, unfairness, and repression. So to conclude, one can say that the vernacular is an essential part of the poem because it emphasizes on the overall injustice seen throughout the whole text. Firstly, as I mentioned before, because it develops the evolving tone in the speaker, it also attributes an identity to the speaker only to rob it of him, and it also portrays this idea of social misjudgment. So it is thanks to the vernacular that Hughes is able to overall portray and criticize injustice in his poem, Ballad of the Landlord.
Yeah. Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys,